don't need the most moral person there.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
want a person who will listen to the people, who will do the job. I don't care why you listen to the people, whether it's out of the goodness of your heart or whether it's out of expediency, as long as the outcome is you listen to the people.
So welcome to another episode of the Alternative Budget Debate 2023, right? So I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and today I'm joined with two very amazing people because it is inevitable that we have to talk to them to talk about today's topic, right? So maybe we can start. Walid, introduce yourself.
Hello, hi, I am Walid and I am an assistant professor at NTU's Public Policy and Global Affairs
Can you
program.
don't start like that? You start like that, it cancel, and all like.
Oh, okay.
It's like,
So I am a YouTuber. Is that better?
and a TikToker.
Okay. I still feel a bit embarrassed to say that. So I have tarik with Walid.
Yeah, Singapore's number one political podcast.
Thank you.
Yes,
I'm happy to have been anointed as the top political podcaster by
I'm
Reggie.
happy to have anointed you. Yes. Bless you. Yes. And we have Mark.
It's an honor to have been in the presence of both of you.
Hey, come on, you are the guy behind the biggest publication,
so
alternative publication down there, like Paise what?
Okay, anyway, I'm Mark and I'm the founder and CEO of Rice Media. We are an digital media platform based out of Singapore. Okay, we cover perspectives, news, insights on contemporary culture across Singapore and some parts of Southeast Asia.
Does your publication have a political platform? Or like a political slant?
I want to be very, very careful about this.
Of course you should.
Everyone has their own politics, right? But like as a publication, we don't have, we don't have an ideology. We don't have like I wouldn't say that we lean a certain way. I think that kind of echoes most of like the people that you would meet here in Singapore, at least, they would. Something we can get into later about how I think that, quite a lot of us are economically left, but culturally right.
No, but why I asked that question? Because I'm quite sure everybody associate Rice Media as on the left.
I think that if you kind of lose, like that if you want to import what we see in the US in terms of like how we define left and right.
It started in France, by the way. Anyway, sorry.
Sure. I guess if you want to
don't. You can laugh, it's okay. We are a relaxed show, We are not tarik with Walid, very serious one. Yes.
Yeah, but I guess the impression from that usually comes from the fact that we, as a publication or a platform, we try to shed light on areas of society that might not receive enough coverage, but that might also, influence very mainstream relevant issues.
Yeah.
So by definition, it would mean that, our coverage sometimes, or I would say sometimes, but more often than not, it extends towards what might be stereotypically associated as kind of like liberal kind of like, issues.
Yeah.
But that is not the intent behind our work.
Okay.
Right. So like what we want to do is to try and bring I would say, as many perspectives to the table as possible. And then in doing that, hopefully you feel a bit more enlightened after you read our content.
And I think you guys are doing a decent job, right? I mean,
so that's really the idea.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Okay, so today I got you guys in to talk about the most important, of all topics, in our 4-part series called the Alternative Budget Discussion, right? The debate. Okay, and this is the most important in my view. And the question is, has PAP shifted economically left secretly? Okay, so this is an important discussion, but before we begin, okay, I want to just give yourself a little bit of time to establish how Singaporean are you, so that you have legitimacy to comment on this.
I always find this kind of questions, I always find them a bit odd, because being Singaporean is, for most people, is an accident of birth. Isn't it? It's an accident of birth,
it is.
Right? So in a sense, right, the true Singaporeans are the ones who chose to be Singaporeans.
The converts,
The ones who came over and then willingly gave up their past, they are the true Singaporeans in the sense. So for everybody else, it's an accident of birth, right? But anyway, so I mean that aside, right? I think there are a few things that would make, if you ask Singaporeans, what are the top 5 traits that make you a Singaporean? Maybe multiracialism or a version of it, meritocracy, food, Singlish probably, and I think it's extremely crucial. Us people who grew up in a different time as opposed to other people. Football was very important for us, but now it's no longer as important for kids, which is a shame. So yeah, I don't.
Hey, that is a position. Huh?
It's a shame. It's a shame because void deck football was very good for multiracialism. Right.
Okay, that's a lecture. We can hold that thought. We can hold that thought. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. How Singaporean are you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
To be very honest, right, I haven't actually spent a lot of time kind of like, it's probably the first time I'm actually being asked to kind of like, even reflect on something like this, because this is not something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about. But what I can say is this, I mean, like, I still feel, I guess, like emotional sometimes, like, when I kind of watch National Day Parade, even though I'll never admit it to anybody, which I am
just
admitting
admitted
now.
to everyone.
I guess that, if I think about it, maybe that counts. If you would to ask me whether like, I feel strongly about my national identity, I would say that I'm just a few degrees more than ambivalent. I don't know whether that means anything.
Okay. I mean,
Right?
I get it.
So like, I think that like Walid raised a very good point. I mean, it's an accident on birth. I didn't choose to kind of be born Singaporean. I am Singaporean. When, like I did the whole thing, like army, NS, etc. Like PSLE, O levels, whatever. Right?
I love how those things are like Singaporean. Tick,
I mean,
Singaporean.
But I think that if you were to ask me whether I would want to be anywhere else, I think that, like on balance, it feels really good to be here, even though I might bitch and moan about it quite often. Right? But yeah, like, I guess in that sense, I am still choosing to be here. It's not like I have that kind of like financial freedom where I can just F off and kind of like, establish anywhere I want. But I mean, truth be told, if you really, really wanted to kind of leave, like you will find a way to do it. Yeah, I mean, like, you just need to kind of maybe live within your means and then find a route, So that still requires I feel like the pros and cons of me doing that versus staying here, it still makes sense to be here.
But what about the increase in cigarette tax now?
I suspect, I mean, like, and I can't say this with certainty, but like from what I've read like in recent times, I have my doubts as to whether that would actually impact smoking prevalence rates here.
Yeah.
Okay, number one. Number two, I think what probably needs to kind of like come up with this is that, okay, like the additional tax revenue, how is the government going to spend it? Is it going to be channeled towards like, no, I mean, is it going to be channeled towards, like initiatives to help people quit? And then you're going to see more, campaigns on like, say like MOH or HPB, for example, that they've been running in the past, right? And then I guess the third thing here, right? Like, we already see people vaping all over the place, unregulated. Wouldn't this just drive the black market? So these are just some questions that I have. I mean, obviously I'm not a professor in that sense, but yeah, I feel like, like it feels logical, right? If cigarettes are now like what, $15, $16 a pack.
Oh, it's already $15, $16.
I think so. Like, I think after the increase, it's going to be about that price. Then if let's say you're a smoker, you have access to kind of like black market alternatives, like seems pretty logical to me.
Well, we're very edgy, huh?
That's what I
very on the edge.
I just you gave me a layup, so I just went straight
for
it.
I love it. Okay,
but I mean, yes. I think that, like that aside, like it's just, a theme of like the budget, I feel like Lawrence Wong just, he came out to say that there's a limit to how much fiscal policy can actually help in terms of, like combating things like, like inflation, right? At the end of the day, we have to self-manage ourselves, which means controlling our spending, right? So discretionary spending, things like, like cigarettes, for example. Yeah, I think that will just have to take a hit. Like you have to kind of manage it on that front, I guess. Maybe that's kind of the subtext. I don't know.
No, but I don't think it's own self manage own self, right? I feel like PAP has secretly moved left. That's why we are having today's discussion. And by moving left, there are definition as to what does economically left means, and I will sit the ground to our professor in studio.
Yeah, so I don't.
You really take it like you professor. I mean, I know you are, but we're trying to be like more conversational. Don't like,
It's an important question, right? So I would say the PAP moved left long ago.
Yes.
I think if the question is being asked now, I think it's a bit too late. I would say it's 12 years too late, and you can really see the ground being set after 2011. What was the catalyst? The 2011 election, right? Elections have consequences. And I always say this, right? If there's no demand, right? I mean, I'm trying to speak your language.
Yes.
Yeah. If there's no demand, there's no supply. And if there's no demand from the voters, there won't be supply from the politicians. When you see your politicians, you have to tell them what you want. You don't just say niceties. Otherwise, you cannot blame them when they don't. And the biggest show of demand is during elections. That's not the only show. Can show through Facebook posts, whatever it is. TikTok videos, Instagram posts for a younger audience, right? So you can show that through other things, but ultimately elections is still the most important. So I would say the PAP moved left long ago, but it accelerated, in my opinion, after the publication of This Is What Inequality Looks Like
Yes.
by Teo Yo Yan. So 2018, and then you can see over the past 4 or 5 years. And initially there was a negative reaction from the government to that book, and even an op-ed was written against it in the Straits Times. But subsequently you see, they are all talking about inequality. They are all talking about inequality. And the PAP realizes, see, the thing is, right, I mean, you're a boss, right? So if you give let's say one day you start implementing, right? You say, okay, we'll have a 4-day work week. And then later on, right, 5 years down the road, you want to change it to a 5-day work week, right? Then there'll be riots, right? I mean, probably I'm exaggerating, but there'll be a lot of unhappiness.
Of course.
It's much easier to not give them that from the start than to take it away once it's given, right?
Yep.
So once all of this, once the momentum has already started, right, shifting left, right, it's difficult to move away from it. Now, but when we talk about left, right, first thing, just that the American or the Western left, right may not neatly fit here. That's the first thing. And the second thing is economically, and I like how you phrased it as well. You were very careful. You didn't say as the PAP move left, because you can move economically left without being politically left. Yeah. So for now,
yes,
yeah.
yes, I love it. So, what is the common understanding of economically left today?
Right. Okay. So if the left and right, maybe in terms of economics, so the left would be more welfareist policies, more redistribution, more government intervention. Think about the Keynesian economics, for instance. And the right would be more free market, right? Now, the left and right, in terms of economics, right, they do not disagree that in the long run, the free market will sort everything out. But the economists on the left would say that in the long run, we're all dead, right? Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead, right? So what is the long run time period? So don't wait for the free market. Let's intervene now. Let's try to equalize not outcomes, but opportunities as much as possible, right? And I think that's the difference between the left and the right. So the right, less government intervention, less welfare, more free market, trickle down economics, right?
Yes.
So whereas for the left, it's more active redistribution.
That's essentially the stage, right? Setting it up. Do you think the government has shifted left, economically left?
I mean, I think it's patently obvious, like based on what we've seen from the different budget announcements over the past couple of years. I think that they don't really have a choice here because I think the broader, I mean, from my perspective, aside from the politics of this, right? So if you look at what Singapore needs, or what's actually happening right now, crazy inflow of Chinese money coming into the market. Just look at the property prices. Look at the rental rates. Cite numerous examples of my friends who were renting properties pre-COVID, and then rental rates just ran up by 100, 120%, 200%, and there are takers in this market, right? So the fundamental issue here, right, is that social compact, right, with the people, right, is at risk here because on one hand, you need that kind of foreign investment and money coming in because it does create jobs, But on the other hand, right, there are things like basic things that are really important to the people here, the affordability of homes,
right,
like that they have to maintain and they have to kind of make sure that they hold up their end of the bargain in that regard. Yeah. So that's why I think that they don't have a choice because on one hand, we need that foreign investment. And there's a lot of money coming in on that front. So the institutions, the financial institutions are all kind of profiting from this, the private banks, for example, right? But at the same time, regular Singaporeans like myself looking to kind of buy a home, that's tough, right? So politically, they need to kind of do something on that front. This is how I see it.
I completely agree. And I think the HDB, if there is one issue that would undo the PAP's hegemony, it is the HDB. And that is, well, you can say probably it's a ticking time bomb, and that has to be settled somehow, right? And there are no easy solutions to this, by the way.
Yes.
No, there are no easy solutions. If tomorrow you suddenly say, oh, let's go back to, it's not the free market, right? So let's go back to $60,000 or $100,000, right? I mean,
Cost
I'm
plus
sure.
premium.
I'm sure the people here, who own this beautiful house, right, would be rioting on the streets together with me. So people have already paid for that. So, but basically, there's no base that you will not alienate through. Tough choices need to be made because I think the once it was decided that it was going to be pegged to the market rate, it was irreversible. So don't forget the twin pillars of PAP hegemony, right? Economic welfare, material welfare, and societal stability. And Mark mentioned the social contract. So the PAP's hegemony is not based on freedom of individual. They've never claimed that, right? It's societal stability and material prosperity. So even if you tell me, oh, GDP growth is 5%, right? Or 3%, right? Who cares? I want to know how much my salary increased, right? That's the most important. I want to know my real salary, not even the gross salary, right? My real salary. So I think that is what the PAP also senses this, right? The PAP senses that there are a lot of unhappiness. There's a lot of unhappiness on housing, on immigration, and so on. So therefore, they are also reacting to this. And as any good government should, they should be reacting to trends that people are voicing out.
So when I was preparing for today's episode, right, I had a long call with Zad, our head of content, and he was like, so you don't think there's a moral awakening? It is about like listening to the people and giving the people what they want. And finally, PAP wake up to say that, okay, we'll give the people what they want.
Right. So I think for the longest time, the PAP has been insulated from, not completely, no party is ever completely insulated from public pressure. Right? Even the most authoritarian of dictators are not fully insulated because there's still a chance of a revolution. So the PAP has never been fully insulated, but they have been relatively insulated from public pressure, right? So as the elections get more competitive, then you will see a natural shift towards listening to the people more. It's difficult to say that. How old are you now, Reggie?
30.
30? Oh,
Yeah.
Still very young. Okay. How old are you?
39.
39, right? So from 35 to 37 or 35 to 39, was there any stage where you suddenly woke up, oh, my moral values, moral compass are deep?
I mean, honestly, it's something I don't even consider. to be frank with you, because I feel like it's if you have to kind of like sit down and really consider your moral compass, right? Then there's something wonky to begin with at the start.
Right.
It's not something that you should actually be asking frequently.
So it's a triggered kind of situation.
Yeah, right? But I mean, I think that, I can see it's not mutually exclusive, right? So yes. they could be listening to what the ground right. sentiment. And I think they're taking that into account. But also, I think that, it's just a very realistic outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the point I was asking the age, right? It's not as if after 35, right? We were also discussing this. Suddenly your values, you find a huge change in your values. Maybe one or two will change, right? But maybe when you're younger, 20s, you will experience more of these shifts as you should, right? Once you reach a certain age, you're more or less set in the ways, right? So it's difficult for me to say that suddenly, there's this quote-unquote moral awakening. But maybe that's also how Singaporeans view politics. We like to view politics through this sense that politicians should be moral and all. No, good politicians should be reacting to demand. And as long as there's demand, they should be reacting to that. I think more fundamentally what is needed is how we view politics and how we have tended to put politicians on a moral pedestal, right? I am not voting for the Pope. I'm voting for, a politician.
You can't. You're not a cardinal. You're not there yet.
Right, but I'm saying I don't need the most moral person there. I just want a person who will listen to the people, who will do the job. I don't care why you listen to the people, whether it's out of the goodness of your heart or whether it's out of expediency, as long as the outcome is you listen to the people.
And that line of questioning actually fundamentally assumes that the PAP believes they're immoral to begin with,
correct.
But I don't think so.
I don't think so as well.
I don't think so. But on the discussion of you saying that since 2011, which is the situation where they lost Aljunied, right?
Yeah.
They have already started.
Aljunied, by the way. Yeah. Aljunied GRC. This Aljunied GRC, right?
Yeah. So your house got lift upgrade, no?
No. Okay. Honestly, I have complaints. Really, like the management, the town council in my area, right? Playground, for example. I'm a dad now, right? Playground, kind of like swings and slides, right? Can stay unrepaired for weeks and months on end. It's a huge rat problem. Taking the opportunity right now, kind of talk about it, right? I'm talking about giant mutant rats in my neighborhood. Okay. The other time Sylvia Lim came across, they did her kind of a rounds, right? Came to my house and wanted to talk about, I don't know why. I was like, dude, there's a rat problem, just fix that shit first. Right? So that's kind of complaints and grievances.
No, you should. Yeah, Sylvia, you must come. Yeah. Come and react, okay?
Yeah, but it has gotten better of late, the rat problem.
Okay.
Yeah, the rat problem, but it's still quite bad.
Fair. Hopefully you get your lift upgrade lah, huh? So do you feel like, help me lay out the ideas. Like you said that since 2011, they have shifted economically left, right? And I do think it's a secret shift in the sense of they are not propagating it. Okay.
Correct.
And we can talk about that nuance later. But tell me, can you help us lay out,
Yeah, so I think CNBC wrote an article in 2015, probably. The PAP is shifting left and without admitting or something like that, right? Because it's not, okay, so first of all, right, the government is very averse to saying, oh, we are doing this because the people have said this, right? And you can understand why they don't want to do that, right? Because for the longest time, first of all, the longest time, the PAP has said that, oh, a good government leads and doesn't follow, right? To some extent, that's true as well, right? So, and then the other reason is because if you say you gave in to public demands, then
You legitimize,
every single thing there'll be public demands, right? Even the Grab and Tin Pailing, I'm just using the opportunity to bring this.
I know. I can tell everyone is using the opportunity. So please go for it. Yes.
So even that, if you look at the statement, right, it is clearly the shift is about public pressure. But no one wants to admit that it's about public pressure. But I think Rice did write an article why public pressure works or something like that, right? So
no, but I agree that they shouldn't. There's no good reason for them to kind of say like, we have. I feel that there are a lot more cons to this, lah.
Yeah. So
sure.
that's why they will never
Yeah.
admit it.
Yeah. And they legitimize your opponent.
Yes. So it doesn't mean that doesn't happen, right? So you're asking me to lay out why it happened.
No, lay out what has happened. Such
Okay.
that you
So
believe it has shifted.
2011, right? If you look at what happened, what were the issues? The main issues: housing, immigration, and transport, right? So transport, you can sort of solve it with demand and supply. And immigration is quite sticky. There are a lot of elements to it, especially with declining fertility rates, right? That was sort of resolved, but then it reappeared again a few years later, even though now it's much tighter, right? But with PSP picking up the mantle, you can see that. And PSP is not just plucking it out of thin air. It is what a lot of people are saying. The other one is housing. As I said, that is the hardest thing to do. But you can see that a lot of... So SM Tharman was also a finance minister back then, right? And the language, first of all, he was using meritocracy with compassion and all that, right? And you already sense an admission without admitting that meritocracy is flawed. Right? So we have to adjust it without changing its core premises. So in the language, but also in the policies, you see more of this redistribution policy. Just a couple of years ago, NUS said that there will be a per capita, they will try to increase the admissions based on per capita income for the lower income, for instance. What is that? That's affirmative action.
Yeah, man. That's like
affirmative action. Which
yes.
is, I'm not against. I am for it. I think that's good. Class-based affirmative action is okay, right? It's good. But all of those, right, are signals that the entire country, the entire discourse is moving left. And you see this last year also, income tax was increased as well.
Supercar tax.
Yes, and exactly. Supercar tax, cigarette tax is different. That's more about punishment.
That one contentious.
But you can see that over the years, slowly, movements have been made to the left. Now, does that mean there's a fundamental shift in political philosophy? No, the PAP doesn't do fundamental shifts, right? They do incremental shifts. So you see that in whether it's housing policies, more and more grants. You see, will you be talking about paternity leave or should
yes,
I
please
just...
go for it. Yeah.
So that one I'm really in favor of course, for no personal biases. No, but I think paternity leave is not just good for the household, spousal relations, and it's not just good to encourage fathers to be more involved. I think if you equalize paternity and maternity leave, you remove the possible potential of discrimination against women when they are hired during the hiring process, because this is a very difficult thing to detect. You can never detect it, right? Nobody will say, oh, I'm not employing you because you can potentially get pregnant.
You will not say that. Yes,
nobody will say that. They'll come up with all sorts of other creative questions, right? What are your
Onyata
plans?
said that. Onyata came out and said that, She had performance review, and the performance.
The boss said that?
boss
Oh.
said that, yeah, because you went on maternity.
Who's this?
Oniata.
Oniata Effendi.
Yeah, Effendi. Oh, by the way, this is sponsored by Baju by Oniata Effendi. Thank
Right.
you. Yes.
Right. So that's wild.
Yeah. Please check out the episode. Yes.
So most people would just say, oh, what are your future plans and all, and then they may not hire somebody based on that. So I think if you equalize paternity leave,
Oh, I never saw it from.
yeah.
Okay,
So I think from the discrimination angle that makes. But let's ask the boss.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, obviously, like it makes a lot of sense.
You don't need to
right?
agree with us, You don't feel pressure,
It's
Although like got 5
debates.
people
Debates
outside, but it's
Dude,
fine.
like, I'm a new dad myself. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, and like, but I think what related to that, what's really interesting is about a segment of the budget was really dedicated to I guess pushing people to have kids, to have families. Would you kind of like, I mean, just for the sake of discussion, kind of like, is that like a left or right kind of thing? I think, or is that not?
No, I think that's existential, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think that's a political.
So I mean,
Yeah.
hot take, okay,
Yeah,
hot take, okay, right? I think low birth rates are actually an equal or more important issue than climate change,
Oh yeah.
Oh.
in my opinion. And I think that when we think about it, like like it all kind of leads that way. For like at some point, if we're not having enough kids, then who's gonna be kind of consuming?
Yeah.
Who's gonna be driving the economy, right? Who's gonna be innovating? So that it goes back to the existential thing. Yeah,
If you think about Singapore itself, I would go one step further. I mean, low birth rates more existential than climate change in the immediate term.
Yep.
I think
it's just a very unpopular thing to kind of
No,
talk
of
about.
course,
Yeah,
of course.
just
And- and of course, it's. I mean, you cannot force people to have children
You can't.
ultimately, right?
Yeah.
So, and
You
I'm
can force
unsure
people
about.
not to have children. Hey, we don't go there. Don't go
Don't
there.
go back to the
No,
1980s.
No, we don't go there. Don't go there.
vasectomies.
They have moved on, so that is something that is good. Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
right. So
True.
you're talking about the other thing.
By the way,
right?
the graduate mother scheme, right, was one of those where even at the height of Lee Kuan Yew's prowess, right, this was
Even he
1980s,
paiseh.
even he had to retract.
Yes.
Even back then, public pressure worked, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, this birth rates thing, because there are social implications. You need the workforce. What are you gonna do? The only other way is immigration,
Yep.
and that will come with other issues.
Which has also proved very unpopular as well.
Yes, it's
So,
very unpopular, and it's gonna come with other issues because there's gonna be a lot of resentment. There's gonna be xenophobia and racism and all of that. So it is. I absolutely agree with you. It's existential. Yeah.
I do agree. Yeah, but I feel like it's not enough to like whatever it's being done. is-
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think people
No,
will
I
look
mean,
at
I'm
the
only
baby
saying
bonus.
that
Oh
because-
yeah,
It's like,
let's
oh
have
yeah,
more
let's have
children.
baby tonight. No.
like okay, look, Rice Media just ran an article about how like like single people are left out of the budget.
I saw that.
Great
That's
point.
That's been years lah.
Yeah, but like
decade in the making.
on the
lah.
other hand, I also see why like okay, like it just makes more sense to kind of encourage people to have more kids because overall more benefit to the economy and things are like. Unfortunately, that's the harsh reality of things.
No, I mean,
but
as
it
with
is true,
all
lah.
systems, if you want to
Yeah.
incentivize certain behaviors, you do certain things, right? To build a system to incentivize it, right? But it does not mean the single people cannot be unhappy, right? So you can be unhappy, okay? You should be,
Exactly.
right? Yes, just like
Exactly.
smokers. Sorry. but yeah. Fair, right?
Should we like light up now? No, I'm kidding.
Tung, we're going
Like,
there.
Yeah,
We're
just
going there.
just
We're
go
going
wild with it, like,
Yeah.
Make a statement. No, I'm just kidding. Let's not do that.
Yeah. But Walid, are you concerned? Because I think there's a part of the internet now that is saying like, why is the government dipping in my pockets?
Okay.
So that side of the narrative existed but not so loud. Now it feels like it's growing. It's very interesting.
You spend too much time on the internet.
No
Don't
lah,
read,
no.
Don't read social media comments.
Okay.
They'll mess up with your mind.
Okay,
They'll mess
okay.
your mind up. So, anyway, I
But you should
think-
comment so that we can mess the algorithm
Yeah,
up. Okay,
please
comment.
comment on ours.
Yeah, I will like, share, subscribe, everything for you.
Right. So yes, but this is also a reality, right? That people who are on the economic left, and I consider myself to be on the left.
Me too, yes.
Yeah. So I think the reality is people on the left who are calling for all of these measures. You also have to admit that it has to come from somewhere.
Yes.
Something has got to give. You cannot continue increasing this without giving. So it has to come from somewhere. So for those who are calling for it, right, people who are more privileged, right, you have to be prepared to be paying higher taxes. You cannot say that, but then you try to come up with all sorts of ways to not pay taxes or whatever it is, right? So yes, there will be that, but also it's about what society we want to build, we want to be as a society, I think. So we have to acknowledge that. And also, I would say that sacred cows, we can even think about the allocation of money to different ministries, right? And we can think a bit more creatively in terms of, does this ministry need that amount of money? If we reduce it by 1%, what happens? All these are very difficult conversations to
Yeah,
have. You know
yeah.
where I'm going with
I
this,
know,
right?
I know.
Yeah, because the
Education
moment
and
you do
defense,
that,
right? Those are the
the
biggest.
moment you go with that, right? Let's say you go with defense. The moment somebody suggests, how could you? You don't understand Singapore's precarity. You are unpatriotic, and so on.
Yeah.
But it has to come from somewhere. If it doesn't come from that, I'm not saying it must come from that. I'm saying it's an option. But it doesn't come from that, people have to be taxed. It's either the GST or the income tax, the corporate tax. For a lot of reasons for people to stay in America. What's the reason for people to stay in Singapore?
So I actually have a question on this, right? Like I know we're talking about how people kind of like, you guys probably lean a bit economically left, right? Do you think there's a difference between that and how people, govern themselves kind of socially and culturally?
Of
Oh,
course.
100%.
Yeah, of course.
So
100%.
like I think
Yeah.
I think that, but doesn't that also kind of like bring up some I don't know what kind of problems that might, or whether I wouldn't say problems lah, but like like whether that there are any inconsistencies there, or like
No, I don't
Oh,
think there are
yeah, I
inconsistency
don't think
because
so also.
because one is talking about the way of life,
Right.
right? So or you're like maybe if we use like social or cultural, like I know those words are very loaded depending on which group of
Right.
people you're talking to, but we just take it as the way of life. Okay, let's say the
Right.
people here, the way of life is more conservative, like traditional family value, blah 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 blah
correct,
blah.
correct.
That is a
Right.
way of life.
Mm.
But how you fund this way of life is a total different discussion, and
Okay,
it
fair
can
enough,
be
fair enough. Yeah, I
it
don't
can
know
be
the
a
answers.
more-
I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah.
No, this,
Yeah.
in America, there was this myth, right? Bernie Sanders was too left to win, right? When actually, on every economic issue, every single one, his position was wildly popular. The median American is economically left, but the median American is socioculturally center or center right, right?
They are center
And-
because they are the beacon of culture, right?
Right.
They set the center.
No, but yeah, correct. You're right.
that is fair, right?
No, we
yeah.
take the left-right spectrum from
Yes,
them
yes, yes,
also,
yes,
right?
yes, yes,
Today,
yes,
right?
yes,
Not in the
yes,
past.
yes.
So that is very possible. It's very possible to be economically left, but socio-culturally a bit more right or center, right? In fact, I would say, if I could say something about Rice, maybe what I would say is Rice is very socio-culturally left, but politically not so much. So I won't say politically right, but I would say politically cautious, like most media outlets are. So even on
Is
the
it an
political
existential crisis?
yeah, no.
Reason,
I
not
think
crisis.
I think all of us are cautious to different degrees, right?
I know
Different
you
shades
cannot
of
sense it, man. You can sense it, right? Right.
No, I would say Rice, as in from a reader's perspective. I mean, socio-culturally, you can see that they lean left,
Yes.
and maybe more so than other outlets. They are more happy to do so. However, not so politically, right? And I think it's very possible to have these three dimensions: culturally, economically, and politically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so that is
Yeah, and
pretty
it's not
interesting.
and it's not a moral judgment, right? It is
Absolutely
just,
not.
it is just
Absolutely
a
not.
recognition
This is how it
that
is.
this is what it is,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So it is.
not.
Yeah.
So then now that we've established, right, that we're in unison, right, that the PAP has moved left, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of economics,
yeah.
economically it has moved left, a bit secretly. Some people are saying that they are moving economically left so that they can move politically right. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I don't know whether they are moving economically left because they want to move politically right, but I can see why that would be that would give them ammunition to move right. I can see why, but I would say the space has shrunk. The space for contestation actually has shrunk politically, while the PAP has moved economically left. In some ways, the PAP has even moved socio-culturally left at a slower pace than the economics, right? I mean, repeal
like
of
377A, all that.
but not just repeal itself. The general attitude towards LGBT communities, for instance, right? The government is very much more welcoming of that than previously, right? So you can do this while maintaining a tight grip on the political scene. And I think that is what they have done. And I think that appeases enough people, enough socio-cultural liberals to say, it's okay.
I'm just kind of curious, just for the sake of illustration, right? Like, how would you kind of like, I guess, define a move politically right in this context?
Yes, great question.
I mean, I'm not sure because I mean, I don't see how extreme it can go in here, honestly speaking. I mean, politically, lah.
Right.
That's why we got professor in the
No.
house.
I mean, I'm
So-
curious
so that's
about
why
this. Yeah.
So what I would say is the term I would say is backsliding, right? So democratic backsliding. So on one level you have all of these indices. You have the democracy index of the economies. You have Freedom House. You have VDEM, where they measure each country's level of freedoms based on certain criteria, right? So that's one. On the other, you can look at it qualitatively, right? Since 2015, for instance, I think 2011 to 2015, there was an expansion of the space. But since 2015, I think there has been a shrinking of the space, right? And you can see this, I think the government reacts more harshly maybe to certain critics or certain types of criticisms. You can see this in how the elections panned out and the election strategy, which backfired, of course, what I call Raisa Part 1. Raisa Part 1. So that was during the
Right,
elections.
let's go there.
No, and at that point in time, it was Raisa only. At that point in time, it was a Raisa strategy.
Now it's Raisa
Now it's like
part
part
one,
one,
right?
then
So-
this part two.
Do you think like the whole COVID-19 thing, right? So like, that 2.5 year period, right, had anything to do with like, that shrinkage?
No,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think- or
the,
there's
the
nothing.
shrinking started before. I'm not saying that it has nothing to do with it, but I think since 2015. Look at the laws that have been passed. Now, the shrinking, right, I would say you can measure it objectively. It doesn't matter whether it's justified. You can take the position that these things are justified. I'm not making a normative judgment. I'm just saying that shrinking of the political space.
I love how we have
So-
to clarify that every
No,
corner.
so I
right?
am happy to take a normative judgment as well. But I think objectively, I think we have to
I agree with
say
you.
that
Yes,
there's...
yes.
So POFMA, you cannot say that POFMA doesn't shrink the political space, right? In terms of limiting, or at least making people self-censor or doubt themselves before they speak. And then you have FICA, of course, which I think FICA is justified, by the way. I'm not a fan of POFMA, but FICA is okay to me. And you have activists being singled out, for instance. So you can see that this has happened over the past few years. But I'm not sure whether they do that in order to do this. I
Okay.
think both things are happening
They
in
can-
tandem. Yeah. And I think why that has happened, maybe it has got something to do with transition. The most tenuous transition of the four so far. The transition within the PAP.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Can
So
you
maybe
elaborate more
that
a
can
little bit on
explain,
that?
maybe that can explain the shrinking of the space, and maybe because during this transition period, so we do not know how exactly the predisposition of the PAP will be for the next generation, right? Whether they'll open up, moral awakening, quote unquote, right? Or will they think that let's shore up our support first, like let's do what we are used to do. Now, what they did to Raisa, right, is not uncommon for PAP in elections. They do that pretty often. It's just that usually it works or it didn't affect them. This was the first time it affected them negatively, right? Which they also sort of have admitted tacitly.
Wait, like the Raisa thing affected the
Raisa
PAP?
Part 1, Raisa Part 1.
Part 1. Oh, Part
Yeah,
1.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Raisa Part 2, it remains to be seen.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not a
It remains-
trilogy, right? There's some like trilogy
I
coming
don't think
later.
that's... But who knows?
Who knows?
But anyway,
Raisa
yeah.
Part 1,
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So I think they are a bit nervous about, or they were nervous about the transition. Yeah, so that's why maybe they were a bit, when you are feeling nervous, you are more edgy and you react more. So hopefully now Lawrence Wong is more secure in his skin, and he will be more open and amenable to criticisms and critiques or challenges from others. Yeah, but it's a developing story because this has just happened. Lawrence Wong just first budget as Prime Minister in waiting, right? So we'll see how this goes. I also want to give him a chance, We cannot prejudge a person, although I'm not too big of a fan of his TikTok videos. But okay, he's trying.
No, that is
He's
you.
trying,
It's
I
you
suppose.
and
It's
TikTok.
just me,
It's
I
just
know.
you and TikTok.
It's just me and
It's
TikTok.
just you and
I know
TikTok.
young people love him,
Yeah.
but I guess
I'm not a fan of that too.
Oh, okay, thank you. But you're not young, also. That's
fair enough. No, I think
that's why.
What's that guy? The guy from Muda?
Sadiq, yeah.
Shamugam was doing squats on TikTok.
No. I
I've seen
mean,
it.
I mean, if you
Do
follow,
you guys want to see Shamugam doing squats? I mean, it's got nothing to do with Shamogam, It's more like, do I want to see a 70-year-old
yes,
man doing squats?
absolutely.
Not really.
No, bro.
I don't really want to see that.
That line of questioning already got something to do with Shamugam, right? It's like, because there are many random 70-year-old that end up.
Really?
No,
You wanna see
no, I don't
squats?
want. I don't want.
Yeah.
But right. But,
I don't want to see guitars.
Yeah.
I don't want to see wushu.
No, but the okay, and this fundamentally assumes that people are going for politics in a rational
you're
shopping
right, you're
perspective,
And
right?
People like
But,
sorry. Yeah.
but it's not exactly the case. And the interesting part is the recent Malaysian election, right? Like Syed Saddiq and Anwar's daughter, they pretty much lost. Syed Saddiq won, but they're the biggest on TikTok.
Yeah.
Right. And you look at what happened. So in other words, it on some level shows that people don't just care about your TikTok videos. You gotta still do the work, right? So
100%.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know to what level I actually want the leader of our country to be relatable.
Yeah. I
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
I get it. You want to kind of seem like you also have some interest outside of work. That's fine. But at some point, you still want to have that
Distance.
Maybe it's just the conservative, Asian kind of thing in me. I still want to have that kind of leader where I feel like there's a reason why he's there,
Right.
Yeah. And so I feel that all of that additional material, that somehow it can take away from that credibility a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm.
I agree.
That is my personal take. But obviously, people feel different.
I agree, but I think it's also our age probably. But I agree with for me it's I agree for a different reason. It's not about the conservative Asian, but I feel when you humanize the politician, right, and then you are not analyzing the parts of the politician's job that you're supposed to be analyzing, right? And then I mean, you see, I've seen this before, okay? And by the way, it's not just PAP fanboys, fangirls, right? It's opposition also do this. I remember there was one time, PM Lee posted something about a bird on his window or what, the office, if you guys remember the bird. So he just took it. It was a nice picture and this bird always rolls by, whatever it is. Yeah. And then in the comments, wow, you are such a great prime minister. What has that got to do with anything, right? So for me, when you humanize them and then you start judging them by how many TikTok videos they do, and then you are taking away from what we should be humanized, what we should be assessing them for, right?
How do you think, I mean, this is also another curious kind of question, right? Just how does this, do you think it helps, Singaporeans or just a general audience at large, right? To be able to say do you think it helps kind of categorize, what's happening in terms of left or right, you think? In terms of helping to understand things?
Okay, my view is no.
Yeah.
That's why in the beginning, I already set the definition of what does economically left means, right? So, and it's defined as taxing the wealthy and then expanding the social spending base, right? So to me, these kind of definitions are very important because it sets the context for the discussion rather than get embroiled in all this emotional and then marketed, energy.
But you see, right? Even though I agree with you, but human beings are not just rational creatures. We
Of course,
are
yes, I know.
emotional and spiritual
Yeah,
creatures.
yeah.
So we may not like it, but I'm sure it appeals. Let me just tell you a personal story, right? So my dad passed away maybe 2 years ago, and there were a few politicians that came. I didn't invite them. I just posted on my Facebook. A few of them came. Zainal Sapari, Nicole Sia, Leon Pereira. They came to the funeral, right? I will never vote against them. I will never, they can do whatever, right? I can never vote, whether you're from the PAP or WP. The ones who came to my dad's funeral, I will never vote against you, right? I have that. For me, you were there on when I was most emotionally vulnerable. I will always remember that. I'll always remember that, regardless. Now, that's a completely irrational thing to do. That has nothing to do with, and I'm saying this as someone whom I hope understand politics quite a bit, right? But even then, I am aware of my emotional bias.
And that is in itself being aware.
Yes,
Right? That
yeah,
is in itself being aware, and that's why you Nicosia stand. Right. And she should just run in Tampines. Right? Then got chance. Right.
Yeah. But Zainal Sapari is from the PAP. So it's the same. So for me, it wasn't about the party per se, but it's very difficult for me to ever vote against people who show you that.
No, and the PAP does a great job in this front. It's how progressive wage model is in every essence minimum wage, but not minimum wage, right? So that is really detaching detaching itself from the narrative of like the outside world, right?
Yeah.
Because minimum wage is so contentious all over the world, and if you use the same word, you get embroiled in all
Correct,
of things.
correct. Correct,
It's like circuit breaker versus lockdown, right? It's like it's you get embroiled in all the media
So
coverage
why
outside.
do you want to get into those unnecessary
Yeah, it's so
discussions?
unnecessary because we just want the essence of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
And so progressive wage model is great in that sense, right?
Absolutely.
We get minimum wage without the rubbish that comes along with minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. And I think we quite agree, like, in terms of whether you agree or not, that's a different. But this is the observation as a phenomenon, right? So we're just observing it. And we went on all these things, right? But at the end, I think the question is, so what is a Singapore that you want?
Right.
And that you want to live for your kids?
Okay. So for me, I mean, this is a difficult question. I would say there are two aspects, internally, externally, right? So internally, what I want to see is more justice, and this includes justice in terms of economic justice. This includes in terms of maybe racial justice. It also includes political justice, right? And what I mean by that is I want to see a day where you have elections without using the harsh stick of the laws against your opponents, for instance. Ideally, that's where I want to see Singapore, right? That's the day. I hope my children will grow up and live in such a Singapore. Then humility for me is externally, but it's also for your own soul, right? A lot of times I find Singaporeans are very elitist, condescending to whether it's low-wage workers or even our ASEAN neighbors. We always think of ASEAN as some backwater, right? And we really don't. And I feel like there's a lack of humility there. I had this module, right? It's government and politics in Southeast Asia. So 13 weeks already. Last tutorial, 13 weeks. Maybe 40 hours already with them. So I said, I hope at the end of this, right, you will, after going through the Southeast Asian countries, you will know we shouldn't look down on ASEAN countries, Southeast Asian countries, and there are things we can learn from them. One of them, such as what? After 13 weeks, like you cannot even think of one
amazing.
thing that.
Okay. So to be clear, right? Just now you were saying like China was the one that put in a lot of money into Singapore in the recent times. But actually, I would argue that China, India, Indonesia are the three biggest block of capital that's been coming into Singapore for a long time, right? At least for the past decade or two, right? And a lot of people, I think they don't realize that our vegetable come from Malaysia, our water come from Malaysia. Rice is a relatively stable because, of Thailand and Vietnam being the largest producer. And they went through, Thailand was never colonized. Vietnam won against the colonial power. So they got a lot more control over rice production and power and, the ability to set price out of the futures market.
Right.
So without all these guys, right, Singapore cannot exist.
No, absolutely.
No,
So that should be the story we should be telling.
Yeah.
And this humility, right? It also, if you realize that you are where you are because of your hard work, yes, but that's what, 20-30%. But it's because of factors outside you, right? Then you'll be more willing to accept higher taxes, for instance, right? You'll be willing to, okay, I need to do my part. I've already benefited. And we need to drop this humility. So I'm talking about ASEAN, now neighbors, but also to people who are less privileged than us. We need to drop the term self-made. Nobody is self-made.
Yes.
What is this self-made billionaire? Do you build the roads yourself? Do you build the school that you go to,
Okay.
right? That term has no meaning. So those two things. It's a long-winded answer, but basically justice and humility.
I'm not sure how I'm going to follow that. That really kind of encapsulated a lot of things.
No, just your
But
it's you.
before I can touch on what I personally want to see, right? I think one of the things that I feel like, and it's one of the things that we have to manage down the road is that I too want in a country or a nation, right, where my kid, or my family, that is kinder, more inclusive, right? But how do we kind of balance these things, right, with the fact that I think that for us to kind of, maintain or even grow, right, like the level of kind of comfort and life that we have here, right? I feel that there's always going to need to be that fight and that kind of survival
100%.
mode, right? And
100%.
the kind of traits that you need, right, to be like a survivor, right, and to fight, right, are necessary. They kind of run counter, right, to a lot of the things that
Absolutely.
we want on the left side. So and that's something that that human being almost doesn't exist. I can guarantee you that when I'm in, when it's war mode, right, you just kind of need to kind of kill it, right? It's very difficult to hang on to the other parts of you, right, that are also there. And so I think that's that balance, I think that as a nation, how do we manage that? So then that comes to my, I guess, flows my answer. Like I think that at the end of the day, I would hope that we are open-minded, right? I think that humility is very important. But I also think that being able to balance these sides, right, of that, if you think about Singaporeans as a personality type, right, how do we kind of like balance it? So hopefully we find some balance there, that like, that there isn't a point where we take our place here for granted, right? And then at the same time, having the humility to kind of like also understand that, so there's that self-awareness there. Right. Yeah, that's where
that's great. Can I share a personal
Yes,
story? Yeah. So I have a huge problem, right, with everybody gets a gold medal during sports day. So huge problem with that. I feel that takes out the competitive edge of people. So when I went to my son's sports day, he was in N2. I saw everybody got a medal. The person who walked, the person who ran. And then I went to the parents, teachers meeting, right? Then I told the teacher, I have a huge problem with this, that, we are encouraging participation. But what you're telling people, don't try hard. You'll still get the same thing as a person who tried hard, right? And then are you surprised when a person when you grow up, when you bring such a person up, right? That person, the first instance of failure, oh my God, the world is against me. And then there's all sorts of quiet quitting. I don't know what. Okay.
Cancel him.
Sorry.
Cancel him. Cancel him.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised by this, right? Then there's when we are the ones. No, but if the younger generation, if we think our generation feels the younger generation is strawberry, that's our fault. We have created the conditions for this strawberry nature, right? So I feel like, yes, I want the kinder, the justice, all of that. But I don't want to reward a person. I tell my son, right, when he plays football, so he plays semi-competitive league, right? I tell him, you win. Not that level yet,
okay.
right? I tell him, you win, you cry. You lose, you also cry. You must have that. Defeat must hurt you. If it doesn't hurt you, right, then don't play this. Do something else. Play Xbox or whatever it is, right? Don't play and I think if we are shielding them from defeats when they are growing up, it will not develop their character. The parents' first instinct, right, is always to protect.
Oh yeah.
But that's dangerous to shield that person. So we must guard against our natural parental instinct. Yeah. It's harder. It's easier said than done. It's very hard to implement. I struggle with it on a daily basis. Yeah.
I guess one way you could kind of like, I mean, just to build from that, you look at kind of like inclusiveness, right? It's also kind of recognizing that there is a place and for in our society for different types of people. And what I mean by that is that it extends beyond kind of like, obviously you have between gender, sexual orientation for sure, right? But what I mean by that also is that I think for society to function, right, you need a good mix of people. Yeah. Right. So you need people who are maybe borderline sociopathic that can kind of like take the country to the next level. And then we also need to accept that comes with certain things that are
Yeah.
Right?
To be very clear.
And then you need to have, like people who don't want to kind of do that, but like are very happy kind of like, fulfilling the other roles. And then there needs to be a place for that. So that is the I guess idealistic utopia,
No. And to be clear,
very practical.
It's very clear. Very and I would argue that the real competition across nations is the middle upper class. The smart working professionals that are like pushing the frontier. These guys are the one bringing in the bread. Everyone else is doing a lot of other things that are important, right? But the real tip of the spear is this bunch of people. At least what I hope is that we can shift the baseline higher, where even if you're not part of this tip of the spear, just so happen because of skill set circulation outward. Because last time forklift driver were very important, right? And now they are like not important anymore.
Now we chat GPT, we die already.
Yeah, exactly. So these things changes, and there will be a bunch of people that are the tip of the spear, and they will forever be the real competition. But for everyone else, can we shift that baseline a little bit higher so that we can all live in some sort of dignity and comfort at the bare minimum? And of course, comfort is a word that you can
but dignity is such an important word. I think people do not realize that poverty can take away. It doesn't necessarily, but it can take away human dignity, especially when you have to ask. You have to ask people for money, right? It can take away your own dignity. So
because to me, I think no really talk about this, in this way. At this point in time in the local landscape, and I think it's an important discussion, to recognize lah. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thanks for your time, guys. It was a pleasure.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this budget series brought to you by Rise Media and The Financial Coconut. If you like what we do, like, share, subscribe, follow our socials. Everything is in the description below. And meanwhile, take care.